Alright, it's time for another QLED Mini LED showdown. In the blue corner, we have a heavyweight contender from Samsung, the QN70F. And this one comes in at a premium of £1,099 at the time of this video. In the red corner, we have a challenger from a brand that's taking the world by storm. This one is the TCL C6K, and the price tag is a very wallet-friendly $599. If you're not familiar with TCL already, you should probably know right now they are among the top 3 on the planet when it comes to TVs. So of course they know how to make a good display, and this display in this TV right here is very interesting, and you'll see what I mean if you stick around. So let's kick this off by looking at the designs on the two TVs. From the front, they look very similar, with the most noticeable difference is the fact that Samsung's frame is kind of this angular design right around the edges, but it is plastic. And if you look at the TCL's frame, it is partly plastic, but it's also got this nice metal trim that wraps right around, giving it a premium look. Another very obvious difference is the legs on these two TVs. The feet on the Samsung TV are plastic and they simply click on. There are no screws. So when it came to putting this together, it was super easy. And then there's this piece of plastic that kind of covers the legs, and this really helps when it comes to hiding the cables down the back. And that is an advantage for the Samsung, but TCL have their own advantage when it comes to the feet, because they can be in this wide position like you see right now, but you also have the option to have them in the narrow stance if you have a smaller TV stand. And the height on both of the legs is enough to fit a soundbar underneath the TV without it obscuring the screen. When it comes to wall mounting, either one of these TV both use regular VESA mounts, so there'll be no issues and no difference there between the two. Now here's where it gets interesting. When you turn the TV sideways, you will notice that the Samsung has a much slimmer profile, which is nice, but it really doesn't affect the viewing experience when you're looking at the TV from the front. Now don't be fooled by the TCL's thicker frame, because with that thickness comes power in the audio. The Samsung QN70F rocks a 2.0 stereo sound system with 20 watts of power, which is respectable for such a slim TV. It sounds crisp, it sounds clear, and when watching movie content, voices really pop, even over the loud explosions and things like that. The only thing is really lacking is a bit of bass, but it does have some nice audio features like Active Voice Amplifier Pro, also Adaptive Sound Pro, and 360 audio. Now when you listen to audio on one and then the other, you will notice a difference when it comes to the C6K, and that's because the TCL TV has a similar 20 watt stereo setup, but it also has 2 woofers on the back to add a bit more depth into those lower frequencies. And this sound system's tuned by the audio wizards at Onkyo, and it also supports Dolby Atmos, although it doesn't have any upward firing drivers. So as I mentioned earlier, that extra thickness gives this extra power and much more room for those 2 woofers on the back. And on paper, this should mean the TCL has a bigger sound, but I'll let you be the judge of that. Throw on some headphones, here's a quick sound test, and let me know if you can hear a difference. Alright, now let's talk about connectivity on these two TVs. Both of them have 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, and this is perfect for PS5 or Xbox or Nintendo Switch 2, and maybe even a PC. And if you are a more serious gamer, you will be happy to know that both of these TVs support 144Hz refresh rates, and they both support ALLM and VRR. However, there is a little feather in the cap for the TCL when it comes to gaming on a PC. It does support AMD FreeSync Premium Pro. And this helps when it comes to reducing screen tearing and things like that. If you're a PC gamer, you probably already know all this stuff. And that's not the only trick that the TCL has up its sleeve. This TV can actually support 288 Hz in full HD. So if you are a PC gamer and you care about the frames in your games, well, your reaction times will definitely benefit from this. And if you are more of a casual gamer, both the TVs do have cloud streaming gaming apps that you can use. The Samsung does have an advantage in this area because it does have the Xbox cloud streaming service, which could be a nice to have feature if you don't own an Xbox. And both TVs do have a nice gaming hub built into the software, so you can just launch that and see all of your gaming specific settings right there without having to go into the main menus. So now let's expand on the software differences a little bit. Samsung used their super fast Tizen operating system. This is their own software, and if you've ever used a Samsung Galaxy device, you'll feel very at home on the Samsung TV. It's fast, it's colorful, it's flashy, and it's a breeze to use, and every app you could want is there within their app store. But I do believe the software superpower on the Samsung is the ecosystem stuff. So the ability to look in your fridge or access your other Samsung devices. So it kind of acts as like a smart hub, and there is also a bunch of features that involve your phones and your other Samsung devices, which is very nice. Now on the other hand, TCL counters this with the Google operating system known as Google TV, and this gives you flawless compatibility with Android and other Google devices. So if you have Google Home devices, they're going to work really nicely with this TV. Also, the Google Play Store for TV is one of the largest app stores on any TV right now. And while both TVs do have some form of voice controls, let's be honest about this, the best voice assistant on the planet right now is probably the Google Assistant. And if Google decide to do it later on down the line, this could go to a whole new level if they introduce Gemini. We'll have to wait and see about that though. And both TVs do support Apple AirPlay, so if you do have Apple stuff, you can just throw content to the TV. You've also got Chromecast, but the TCL does also play really well with Apple HomeKit stuff. So if you're already invested in that Apple ecosystem, well then you might want to consider that. Okay, time for the main event, the picture quality showdown. Side by side with 4K content, the TCL C6K, despite its much lower price tag, holds its own really well against the Samsung. Both push out really vibrant, saturated colors that make animated movies and nature docs leap off the screen. And the Samsung QN70F seems to really shine when it comes to brighter scenes. You get a great amount of detail in those bright areas. The colors actually out of the box look really nice too, and very punchy and vibrant. My first impressions when it comes to the strengths of the TCL is the contrast ratio is pretty amazing. The colors appear to be very strong, and you do seem to have this kind of warmer cinematic tone to the display before you mess with any of the settings. And the biggest noticeable difference when you look at these two side by side is definitely the dynamic range, and that is because of the difference in panel tech, which I alluded to in the intro. So the Samsung QN70F uses a VA panel, a vertically aligned panel, and it has 17 vertical dimming zones, which means if one side of the screen is dark, it can turn off a bunch of the zones on that side. However, this is where it gets interesting. The TCL uses a newer style LED backlighting panel known as HVA, high vertically aligned, and it's also a full array backlit panel. And because of this, it has 512 local dimming zones, so it can actually turn off sections of the scene, creating much better local dimming and much less blooming of bright areas and colors when there is bright next to black. And this is kind of incredible at this price point, because in the past, QD Mini LED panels like this with this many dimming zones were reserved for flagship TVs, and of course would cost a lot more. And that's because of the fact that they're more expensive to make, but also because it doesn't compromise on the brightness and it significantly enhances HDR capabilities. And TCL say the contrast ratio is actually 5 times that of a regular IPS panel. And now here's where things get even more interesting when it comes to the display. So Samsung tend to go all in-house when it comes to their color calibrations. They don't really reach out to other brands to get presets, and they really rely on their NQ4 AI Gen 2 processing chip to do all of the image processing and upscaling, and it's actually very good. Now the TCL on the other hand also has an impressive chip. They call it the AI PQ Pro chip, which also does a pretty good job of upscaling lower res images. However, here's where it starts to differ. TCL have actually teamed up with Dolby to calibrate some of the picture profiles on this TV. So this TCL actually has an official Dolby Vision IQ certificate as well as an IMAX Enhanced certificate, and because of that you do have those dedicated modes dialed into this TV for when you're watching those specific types of content, which can be found quite commonly on Disney Plus, on Amazon Prime and Netflix. So that is definitely a nice to have feature on the more affordable TCL. So let's wrap this up. If you go with the Samsung QN70F, you're paying a bit of a premium for the iconic brand name. For the extra 500 quid, you get an ultra slim design, better cable management, slightly punchier brightness, just a little bit. You get nice sound, and this is really cool, you get 2 remotes, including one that charges via radio signals, which is fantastic, it never needs batteries. Also, Samsung's Tizen software and ecosystem integration is top tier, and you also get that Xbox cloud streaming service. So overall, it's a really nice package deal. Now, on the other hand, the TCL C6K 65-inch, this comes in at an incredible price, especially when you consider the tech differences here. The design is nearly identical from the front next to the Samsung. Yes, it has a slightly thicker frame, but then in exchange, you get that Onkyo 2.1 sound system that really improves the bass levels. You get the brilliant Google TV platform, full array backlit panel, and if you are thinking about hooking up a PC to the TV, well then you have the benefit of the AMD FreeSync Premium Pro, and then you've also got that killer feature, the 288Hz refresh rate at full HD. And let's not forget, you will be £500 better off. We are definitely spoiled for choice when it comes to TVs these days, and you have a lot of options. So let me know in the comments below, which one of these 2 TVs would you go with and for what reason? Let me know. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you just subscribed, you're now one of the finest subscribers known to man, and I will see you in the next one. Don't be late.